Well, hello there, YouTube, and welcome to the start of a Bouguereau master study. And I am going to be working on an 8 by 10 inch linen panel. This panel is the Centurion Universal Primed Linen Painting Panel. And this is a really nice panel because it is, once again, a linen, and it's also stretched onto a MDF panel, so it's a pretty sturdy and not so heavy surface to paint on. I am going to start this with an underpainting today, and just going to be kind of a classical setup, so not too many colors on here. This is just Flemish White. It is a lead white made by Rublev. Though you could use any white you want. If you don't want to use lead white, that's fine. This is raw umber green shade. So just raw umber, but raw umber green shade. Winsor Newton brand. And let's just go ahead and start drawing. And I like to draw with big shapes and not so much of a transfer drawing method, though that could be much easier, but more of just simple shapes that I move around and adjust that way. The canvas is toned neutral gray color. I toned it with oil paint a couple weeks, or I don't know, maybe 2 weeks ago. I'm more thinking of the composition right now, the placement of the model's head relative to the canvas. It's an awkward angle because the model is turned, and this is a cropped version of a Bouguereau. I wasn't going to paint the whole thing on an 8 by 10, and we mainly like to focus on portraits anyway. So the hand is a little bit smaller than what, not the hand, the head is a little bit smaller than my hand. I usually like to paint faces about the size of my hand, but this will work just fine. Now this is going to be a real-time video for those of you that may be new to the YouTube channel. So I will talk and paint at the same speed. This is not edited. So you will see the mistakes and everything. Successes, mistakes, all that good stuff. Looking for the outside shape now. I've figured out the placement of the head. And looking at this is a painful looking pose that Bouguereau's model must have been in. It's sad though, the most painful poses tend to be the most aesthetically appealing ones. Being an art model is a job. I'm not using any medium, I'm just thinning the paint out with Gamsol. And I'm getting an idea of whether or not I want to put some of the stuff on the model's head. I don't know if I feel like it. This will be a long-term painting, by the way. This is not a painting that will be finished in 1 or 2 videos. It would be crazy to think that I would, or someone would even attempt to finish a Bouguereau study in a couple videos. Or you could edit one, of course, but that's not my style. Okay, so now we're gonna close in on the shapes. Looking at the negative space from the forehead up here down towards the shoulder. Just this little shape here. It seems to be a little different. Now remember that the camera is at an angle with respect to the painting because it is not a good idea to paint with a camera right in front of your face, you won't be able to see it. Also, always have your painting as close to 90 degrees, if not exactly 90 degrees, vertical and at eye level. And that appears to be about all right. Now I'm going to go ahead and start to make some guesstimations for where the eye sockets are going to fit. Not an easy pose. This is definitely one now, the more I think about it, the more I'm like, I probably should have used the transfer drawing method. The big word is angle. There's a lot of angles here. No need for details because we may end up moving stuff around. Last thing you want to do is add a bunch of details and then realize you have to change it all up. Anyone that wants a challenge, this study is definitely going to be a challenge. Now always start with something that you can manage. Because the truth is, you're going to have to move things around. There's nothing worse than using a method of painting that you just don't like, and you end up hating the process. So I tend not to like to use transfer drawings too much. I like to draw things out with paint. So even though a transfer drawing would have been much safer, I would rather have fun. And this is a very organic process. Everything is being built in relation to everything else. The same thing when you get the color too. I always stress that with my online students. Oh, and these brushes, by the way, this is a size 2 filbert bristle brush, Silver Brush Grand Prix. I like to work with bristles. I'm not the best at maintaining my brushes though. When I'm done with them, I tend to put them in a Ziploc bag and put them in a freezer. Occasionally, like once every few days, I clean them. That's what I recommend you should do. I also don't recommend you have a palette setup similar to mine. I'm only doing this because I want you to be able to see what I'm doing. And I got a lot of complaints on my wooden palette, so I switched to this setup. It's not the best for your arm, because your arm is up most of the time. So if you can use a handheld palette or a tabletop palette might be easier. Alright, and easy does it. Simple and basic shapes is the key, because it can get, and it will get, really complicated later. The color on this painting is fantastic. I did see this one in person once in the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York. I don't know what's there anymore, but this one stopped me in my tracks. I had to sit there and stare and study this painting. Wish I could paint them in person in the museums, but I'm not really much of a people person. So being surrounded by all those people walking around the museum while painting is not my ideal setup. And I'm purposefully not putting the shadow on the side of the face yet, because I'm trying to walk around. Trying to walk around and adjust things in the most simplistic manner possible. And sometimes it's just not a good idea to mass in a bunch of shadows right away. Especially with this light setup. Bouguereau did paint with natural light. And I'm going to try something. I'm going to use the paper towel to add the shadow shape. I like to use Viva brand paper towels. This would not be so easy with paper towel that would fall apart. I'm not sponsored by any companies, by the way, so I'm telling you stuff simply because I believe it to be true. Careful with these angles. I think the eye needs to move down. This whole angle is a lot sharper. This is why I said Don't put a lot of details in too early on, because the likelihood is that you're going to have to do exactly this. What angle is that? I can't even tell you. Really sharp angle. And when I put the shadow in there, it actually helped me see it. So I'm going to do some more of that. Sometimes when you add information, it helps you see mistakes. When you put a shadow, it starts to look more dimensional. And when you have something that's wrong that's dimensional, it's easier to see the mistakes. This is a stage I refer to as an educated mess. I'm purposefully holding back a little bit with the detail because of the complexity of this pose. With a portrait, if you can nail the angle between the eyes early on, you're in a good place. That looks pretty close to me. And the eyes, the angle between the eyes should be measured from tear duct to tear duct and from the edge of the eye to the edge of the eye. Usually the tear duct is the easiest place to begin to get some specificity. Now I'm going to use a horizontal line to figure out where the ear should go relative to the eyes, now that I have the eyes roughly located. So this is the corner of the eye. On a horizontal line, this should be a little lower than the ear. Look at that. So the ear now moves. I may have put that in wrong. Let me check. The eye should be a little lower on a horizontal relative to the ear. That should be good. Eye is just a little lower. Completely moved the ear. So my first guesstimation was totally off. This is fine. This is not a standard pose. Not like I draw people with their heads tilted every day. And you almost have to use some systems for checking, and the system we're using is horizontal and vertical line. Horizontal line is sometimes referred to as a plumb line. A horizontal is just a horizontal, but sometimes you'll hear teachers say it's plumb on a horizontal, plumb on a vertical, and it's just, that's what that means. the plumb line. Alright, so here I'm looking at the size of it doesn't matter too much to me right now. But what is important is some of the anatomical stuff, like the tragus of the ear. And my guesstimation was like right next to the eyebrow. And it's off. The eyebrow is a little lower. So the tragus of the ear should move up to about there. Okay, so now relative to the position of the eyes, the next thing I'm going to look at is going to be the nose. And I'm going to use a horizontal. And I'm going to draw the horizontal from this tear duct. I'm going to do the same on the reference. I'm going to look at the angle that the nose, so this is the angle I'm looking at. If this is a vertical, I'm looking at the angle that the nose makes. Not easy to do, just eyeballing it. So I need to be a little more meticulous. So this is a vertical from the tear duct. I'm looking at this angle for the nose. Do the same, just close one eye, and I'm doing the same with the reference. And it is leaning a little too far that way. I don't know how many of you play pool, billiards. I'm a newbie at it, I'm terrible, but looking at this angle reminds me of a bank shot. What angle do I want to make with this bank shot? What angle do I need so I can pocket the ball from the bank shot? So that's kind of what I'm thinking about. It's abstract. Now that I have the angle somewhat adjusted, I'm going to repeat the process one more time. And I can almost even use the shadow, using the shadow, and it still needs to move slightly this way. And what I'm doing is I'm turning the head. The decision was made up here, and everything is turning a little bit relative to it. And we're 20 minutes in, and I'm at a stage where I would have been at in 5 minutes on a regular everyday pose. So remember, first was the guesstimation stage, kind of winging it, just using your gut instinct, and sometimes you'll get it right first try. But for those of us mere mortals, we're gonna get it wrong. And rather than rage quitting and getting frustrated, it's important to know where to go from there. Now I'm looking at the shadow on the shoulder. I have the jewelry here. I don't think we really need, so take that out. And everything is going to be determined based off of the angle of these eyes. Since this is a pre-recorded video that's not being edited, I'm taking much more time than I would with a live stream. A live stream, I'd have that pressure of gotta look a certain way at a certain time. Alright, so next we're going to start to add in some light. And the light is going to help us to make adjustments. When you're doing an underpainting, a grisaille, it's important that you know what you want your painting to look like when it dries, so that your layers can facilitate one another. So I want this layer to be much lighter, and the focus is on getting proper light and shade. Just like when we added the shadow and I quickly noticed that my angle was off. When we add the light, the goal is that we will identify things. This Flemish White from Rublev, by the way, is a mix between linseed oil and walnut oil. But lead white itself does tend to dry pretty quickly, so I'm not worried about it being slow drying. Usually I'll recommend not to use anything walnut oil based in the earlier layers, but since it is a lead white, it really shouldn't be much of an issue. In fact, this Flemish white dries much faster than my Williamsburg lead white did, and much faster than my which one am I using now? The Michael Harding lead white. So I'm using the tone of the panel to be stand in place for some of the midtones. Now, because I'm working like this, of course my objective is going to be later on to glaze color. You can see that the lead white is very transparent looking, but it is in fact a very dense pigment. Now we're going to have to use some midtones. Now we are in a little danger here with these midtones because we don't have the shadows painted in yet. So before I get too far with that, now we're gonna start to mix up the shadows. So this is in danger of getting too close to the shadow value. But Bouguereau does play a very close, play it really close with light and shadow. Now it'll do no good for me if I get these values perfect, but I don't put the shapes in the right spot relative to one another. But you have to be patient with yourself. Patience is incredibly important for a pose like this, because it's easy to get frustrated and give up, or just switch to another painting that has an easier pose. But you should always work on your weaknesses. If your weakness is heads, painting heads that are in angles, then work on that. Because then when you paint a head that's not on an angle, piece of cake to draw it. I'm going to put in some of the reflection here. That's why I said it's very close. Bouguereau plays it very close. This should not be the same value as this, but they are on the Bouguereau. They appear to be. And there's a lot of reflection. There's the white of the dress there, so very tricky. Now I'm doing all the work that would have been already figured out if I did a transfer drawing, but the advantage is I'm layering the values at the same time that I'm figuring out the drawing. It's a very dangerous way of starting a Bouguereau. Especially with the complexity of these values. You want to paint exactly what you see, but with less detail. Significantly less detail. And if you can push the distinction between light and shadow further, like I am here, I'm pushing this shadow, the contrast of this shadow much further than what I see. That's good. Don't even worry about highlights at this point. Highlights will do nothing but give you false hope, because things look good when you add highlights. But you don't want to add a highlight to a form that you're not too sure about. The only reason you would want to do that is to gauge whether or not the form is in the right spot. It's almost like traveling for work. If you move a lot, if your job requires you to relocate a lot, you're probably not going to want to spend a lot of time decorating your living space, because you're going to have to leave. And that's what's going on here. In the beginning, you are moving a lot. Once again, on a horizontal, the eye is only a little bit lower than the ear. And I can't wait to actually get to the color and the form and all that stuff, but I gotta do my homework. I enjoy this stage too, though, don't get me wrong. But in order to put in all the fun stuff, all the detail stuff, you've got to build that foundation. You even painted in some teeth. This study is really gonna be complicated. Kind of wondering what I really know what I signed myself up for. I don't think so. Now this is much closer to the nose, so I'm going to either have to move the nose down, which I don't think is a good idea, or I'm going to have to move the mouth up, which is something that happens about, I'd say, 80% of the time, so I'm just going to move the mouth up a tad bit. And how I move the mouth is I draw in all the stuff around it and then use that to push it. And this is absolutely not something I would want to do uh, with color. Absolutely not. No, thank you. I'm sure I could, but I think it would be a tad too stressful. There's a little bit of light reaching the upper lip. Totally the opposite of, say, painting an older man with a beard. That would be great. That would be awesome. This is a young lady, which, by the way, women are tend to be much softer. Their forms, not always. There's always exceptions, but in general, the youth is harder to paint, harder to draw. So always know the difficulty level of something before you begin. I was aware. I knew that this would be difficult, which is why I planned to do this in monochrome first. The shadows are so faint. Which adds another degree of complexity, making this perhaps the most complicated portrait study out of all the videos on my YouTube channel. It has everything imaginable that would make portraiture more difficult. I'm going to break some rules here. I am going to add the reflected light, and I'm going to overdo it at first. This has lighting that's coming from the bottom. It's got all this subtlety. It's magnificent. Bouguereau has been referred to as superhuman. His ability to draw and paint. And I can definitely see that. Now I'm gonna put a light plane. Increasing the value range a little bit. I am now more confident of the placement of that shape. As I say that, I'm probably dooming myself to having to move it later. But at least now at this point, I'm able to see the structure with some volume to it. And by the way, this is not an underpainting that you want to do in one sitting. Don't even think about it. And there's a lot of you that are similar to me in that when someone tells you not to do something, you go and do it right away. So know that this grisaille, this underpainting, since it is raw umber greenish, you can call it a verdaccio if you want to, but whatever you call it, this is beyond difficult. But I recommend you do this because you will learn from it. As am I. I'm definitely learning from this. I'm learning every day. Every day that I get to paint, I learn something. Now you see as I start to put in more form, I'm relaxing a little bit. That initial fear of everything was chaotic and all over the place is subsiding. Now it's more of a relief. I was a little scared at the beginning of this one. Can't believe Bouguereau's skill level. And this is one of those paintings that it doesn't look like a photograph to me. It has a level of realism that feels like this is what it looks like to really see, to observe something. And it's key that you observe that I'm moving all around. Yes, I do tend to stay in one spot for a little bit, but I do venture around. Now, typically, an underpainting like this is done on a warm tone, a brownish toned canvas rather than a cool one. Um, so I want you to know that I toned these panels ahead of time. I didn't have one that was warm toned, but Bouguereau potentially did his underpainting with a warmer tone. I'm not sure, but I did hear that he also used gray. I think most painters use a gray tone. This brush right here is a silver brush brand, pure red Sable, size, what is this? Size 4 cat's tongue shape. Not made from cat's tongues. Cat's tongue shape. the more comfortable I am, the more form I start to add. I'm sticking with the main triangle. Eyes, nose, connected the eyes and the nose connect dot 1, dot 2, dot 3. Say the bottom middle of the nose is a dot, and the edge of the eyes is another dot. Connect those dots and you get a very specific triangle. That is the main triangle. Now we can start to throw in some highlights. Okay, I'm going to sit back a little bit, look at the painting from a distance. Obviously you can hear that I'm a little further away. And I'm looking for the stuff that is the most different. Since I've been focusing on the face, a lot of stuff around the face that's obviously very different. So I think I will go and adjust the hairline a lot lower. And another thing that Bouguereau did amazingly well in this painting is he painted a smile. Pay very close attention to the smile. And it doesn't look weird. A lot of times, I'd say 99% of the time, when a mouth is painted in the smiling position, it looks weird. A weird look. That's usually because when people are painting smiles, they're painting them from a photograph in which there's some distortion in the photograph. And the distortion is just magnified. And it's just not a natural looking smile. Not even going to think about putting in the teeth this early. I'm inventing a little bit. This is not part of the reference. Remember, lead white makes it easier to control the midtone range, because if I was doing this with titanium white, it would just raise the value way too much. But you can do this with titanium white. You can. You just need to have a more delicate touch. And the more I look at it, the more I stand back, the more concern I have with the angle. So it's likely, actually it's highly likely, that the angle looks very off. But also remember, you are looking at the painting at an angle. So do you see that this is flat? This part right here is flat. That means it is not at an angle anymore. You're seeing the painting straight on. So I think the angle of the eyes and the eyebrows are acceptable, but the nose is definitely going to need a little more adjusting. Whoops, not that dark. And the smile is a little heavy. I may have this curved a bit much. Now I'm thinking about how I want this to dry. And I do want the lights to be much lighter. Then again, I do think I will attempt to give this underpainting 2 layers. Perhaps next time we'll add an interesting twist to the underpainting process, but I won't spoil too much. I'm also going to give myself time to actually figure out how I'm going to do it. And remember, this is portrait painting on insane mode. Very, very difficult. So take your time with this one. And do it. Don't be afraid of it. Especially those of you in the online classes. Definitely do this one. I'll mention it on Patreon. Alright, I'd say it is now in a decent place to let dry. Last thing I want is to make sure I don't have any dark rectangles under the nose. That's a no-no. Okay, alright, so let's add a little more light. Just make sure this dries much lighter, or this underpainting is much lighter, that is. So that we can glaze color onto it eventually. Alright, so I will turn it so that you can see it without the distortion from the camera. This is what it looks like. Not an easy one at all. There's many things I want to adjust. I know that the eyebrows need to be lower and all kinds of stuff. There's all kinds of stuff that I would like to keep adjusting on it. But that's why we're going to work on this many more times after this. So, once again, I really hope that these videos help you out. Remember, if you enjoy my content, please consider subscribing to my YouTube channel. Help me reach my goal of 100,000 subscribers. I'm fairly close to it. It would be such a nice honor to reach that milestone. Also, remember, if you enjoy my content here on YouTube and you want education beyond that of YouTube videos, if you want personalized tutoring via videos where I give students online pointers on their classroom projects, please consider checking out my online classes on Patreon. The online classes start at about $10, or exactly, they start exactly at $10 a month, and that level allows you to send your paintings in progress to me for me to give you advice, along with gives you access to all of the pre-recorded videos for each of the projects on my Patreon. Once again, thank you all so much for watching. I wish you the very best in all of your artwork, and I'll see you on the next one.